A football player takes a big hit.
You all right? Kurt, you all right?
And spirals into a medical emergency.
I thought he was going to die.
An observant mother spots a strange reflection and saves her young son's life. A killer lurking in the forests.
The fungus had eaten right through my skull.
The brain-destroying fungus that could strike anytime. Fighting for feeling.
And the doctor kind of looked at him and said that there's no chance for Amy to walk again.
A miracle treatment for spinal patients. And trapped inside a misshapen skull, a girl with incredible courage.
She was born for a great reason.
The most incredible species on the planet is human. A high school football game goes horribly wrong.
By the time we got down, he was losing consciousness.
A 15-year-old boy makes his last tackle.
You all right? Kurt, you all right?
You all right?
I thought he was going to die.
He'd suffered the scariest injury of all.
My wife knew, and she said, "Ken, it's bad. It's really bad."
Look at me, buddy. Look at me. Are you okay?
One of the assistant coaches came over and squatted down and looked at him, and then immediately signaled for the trainer to come. And the trainer looked at him and almost immediately started, reached for his cell phone and started calling.
Justin Go played for his junior varsity team. He loved the game, and he knew the risks. On a September day in 2000, Justin's team was confident of a win. They kicked off, and Justin made the first tackle of the game. He smashed heads, and he went down.
The trainer asked me to hold his hand and to try to keep him from losing consciousness.
In the blink of an eye, the damage had been done. Justin was slipping away. Justin's mom was also on the spot.
My wife, as a registered nurse, could tell that from the condition of his pupils that there was something pretty serious going on inside his head.
There was. Justin had suffered a severe concussion from a clash of helmets. Worse than that, he was bleeding heavily inside his skull.
He had bleeding outside of the brain, just under the skull, and that blood clot tends to increase in size and press on the brain and to progressively come closer and closer to irreversible damage.
In a head injury, the brain swells. If there's bleeding, it swells quicker. The pressure builds up rapidly and dangerously.
He had a blown pupil. He had what we call a dilated pupil, so that his right pupil was big and his left pupil was small. And that's because he had pressure on the brainstem, which was putting pressure on one of the nerves that runs the eye. And that's a bad sign.
Justin's chances were starting to look grim. Dr. Chestnut's team had to go in and try to save his life.
We very rapidly made a small incision, drilled a hole on it off some of the pressure, and then we expanded the incision into sort of a question mark type incision, and then removed a large flap, opened the door, I took the clot out, and relieved the pressure.
They removed a large clot that had formed inside his skull. That was a start, but Dr. Chestnut wasn't confident.
He came out and told us that there'd been a significant injury, that couldn't guarantee that he would live.
Later, Justin is given 72 hours to pull through. and his family and friends can only wait. A telltale sign of disaster.
Have you noticed that often with Joshua, his eye, it comes out a pale reflex?
Their son had a serious problem.
There's never been anything like this in my family, nor Linda's. And I was just scared, really scared.
A rare form of cancer was attacking his eye.
Once it's got outside the eye, it's almost universally fatal.
Joshua Wilson is now 5. Look at him closely, and you may just spot a difference from other kids. Joshua has only one eye. The other one's glass. He's fit and he's healthy.
Good boy. Shall we wash it then? No. Here we are then.
But things could have been very different. When he was only 1, his mother saw something strange. It was an amazing stroke of luck. She noticed that one eye seemed eerie when it caught the light. That was a miracle discovery that would save Joshua's life.
There was a few photos that we'd had taken where the reflex, you normally get a red eye reflex, and one of his eyes seemed to come out quite pale all the time.
One eye was different from the other. It glowed yellow in the light. It was very different when caught in a camera flash.
The only way I can describe it is like his pupil would look like it wasn't there.
His folks didn't know it at the time, but this yellow eye was a very bad sign. It was the sign of cancer.
So the yellow reflex is because the tumour's grown so big that it's now sending back. The tumour is whitish yellow in colour, and so it's reflecting back white yellow light to the pupil, and people notice it in certain lights.
After a preliminary consultation with their doctor, they looked on the net. What they found out only rang more alarm bells.
That began to scare me because then it was, obviously they have all the treatments and what you have to go through, and there was the removal of an eye, there was chemotherapy, radiotherapy, cryotherapy, all these horrible things which I thought, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen now?
And then the specialists confirmed their worst fears.
My emotions were going out of control, and I just felt that he was going to go blind. That was my ultimate thought, I suppose, if I'm honest. And was I going to lose him, and what was going to happen?
Joshua had retinoblastoma, a rare cancer that affects less than 1 in 20,000 kids.
It's a cancer that develops in cells that are turning into the retina, so it's only found in young children. It isn't something that affects adults. It's the eye that, as the eye is developing and the retina is developing, some of the cells become cancerous.
The biggest fear is that if the cancer cells grow, they can migrate out of the eye.
It can grow down the eye nerve so that seeds start to form in the brain, or it can get into the blood vessels of the eye and seed elsewhere. And there is good evidence, particularly from developing countries, that if it's out of the eye, it's lethal in almost all the children.
The cure? The doctors had to move fast. First, they hit Joshua with a high dose of chemotherapy.
During the chemotherapy, he was lost all his hair. He was very sick. He had this pipe which we had to sort of have blood administered and things like that. He had to have blood transfusions, platelets, everything. It was just a horrible time.
Josh got better, but his eye didn't. There was no other option. The eye had to come out. Josh would have to live with only one eye for the rest of his life. But Josh has managed well. That was until his folks got more bad news. Joshua's cancer had flared up in his good eye.
The only really thing left now was radiotherapy, which we were going to have to undergo on a daily basis. He would be anaesthetised every single day of the week, so Monday to Friday, have his radiotherapy, and that would go on for 20 sessions, so we had 20 sessions of that.
Joshua has pulled through. It's a waiting game. But things are looking good.
Since he's lost his eye and the radiotherapy's over, the last few months we've seen a real spike in that, and he's really starting to run around and just become a boy, which is what he desperately needs to do.
The miracle is not just that Josh has survived. The miracle is Joshua is here today because his mom spotted the yellow reflex in his right eye when he was young. Joshua owes his life to that moment. "15-year-old Justin Go suffered a head injury in a high school football game.
Look at it. Are you okay?
By the time we got down, he was losing consciousness.
As he left the field, he had no idea where he was going.
He had bleeding outside of the brain, just under the skull, and that blood clot tends to increase in size and press on the brain and to progressively come closer and closer to irreversible damage.
Before he knew it, Justin was plunged into a full-on medical emergency. Surgeons removed a large clot from inside his skull, but nobody knew if he would ever wake up. His friends gathered to say their prayers and to say their farewells.
Talking to him and not knowing if he's going to wake up is really hard. You know, you think about the last time that you talked to him and all the things you wish you would have said, but you never get the chance to.
The hours ticked away. If he survived 72 hours, he might make it. But the doctor wasn't confident about what shape he'd be in.
He said if he became functionally independent again, that would be a miracle.
A week later, and Justin woke from his coma. He was alive, but no one knew what sort of life he'd be able to lead.
I hoped, obviously, I hoped that he would recover 100%, but just with the odds against him and knowing that there was other football injuries that were very, very similar, and none of them have been able to recover.
Would Justin be like all the other injured players? Only time would tell. For months, he needed rehab. It was going to be a long haul.
I'll never forget one of the first times he saw himself. At that point, like I say, he had no control over the right side of the body, and that means the face too. So his eyes weren't tracking together, and he couldn't close his mouth. And the look on his face when he realized how much it affected just even his appearance was heartbreaking.
Slowly, Justin regained control of his right side. 2.5 months later, he returned to school. 4 years later, Justin's almost back to his old self. He still has some weakness on his right side, and his short-term memory isn't perfect, but it's a far cry from 4 years ago.
I was paralyzed. The whole right part of my body, split down the middle. I couldn't move. That was from the injury. Apparently, I got left part of my brain bruised or something like that, so it damaged the whole right part of my body. I couldn't open my right eye. I couldn't shut my mouth.
In fact, it's nothing short of a miracle. Brilliant surgical intervention and Justin's incredible spirit have put him back in the land of the living.
He has made a remarkable recovery. I mean, he's a poster child for brain injury care and trauma systems and the involvement of neurosurgery in very early care.
Justin's accident had nearly killed him.
I mean, you're 15, you think you're indestructible. You still think that, the outside world doesn't affect you at all. You read about things in the paper, you read about, injuries and deaths to people on the news, but you never think that's gonna happen to me. And all of a sudden, one day it does.
And now he's eternally grateful to be given a second chance.
4 out of 5 guys that have my injury die. I was one of the very few in 100 that even could walk and do things on my own again.
Justin's almost where he used to be. I mean, he doesn't just go day by day like everybody else. He lives every moment as full as he can. So just because he knows what it's like to almost lose it. it's a very special gift that he gets to have.
A tragic spinal injury at age 15.
I couldn't feel my legs. So, I mean, kind of right there, I think I knew something was wrong.
A day in the country turns into a living nightmare.
And the doctor kind of looked at him and said that there's no chance for Amy to walk again.
But could an extraordinary medical procedure get her back on her feet again?
To be able to offer that hope and that opportunity is exciting. It's wonderful.
3 years ago, Amy Fells nearly lost her life. Too much alcohol, too much youth, too little experience. Amy and her friends were on their way home after a day's partying. Amy was a passenger in the back when the car veered off the road.
I remember screaming. I remember opening my eyes and being halfway in the back window and halfway out of the back window, just laying there, not being able to move.
In a flash, her life was shattered.
I woke up at the accident for like a split second and realized that I couldn't feel my legs. So, I mean, kind of right there, I think I knew something was wrong.
There certainly was something wrong.
I was the only one injured in the accident. The 5 others that were in the car with me walked away fine, cuts, bruises, that's about it. You know, they're on living their life normal. You know, I'm living my life too, just in a wheelchair.
But Amy won't give in. Later, her determination to walk again pays off. This is one of the most beautiful parts of North America, one of nature's treasures in Ontario, Canada. It's paradise here. Pine forests, crystal clear lakes, and beautiful tranquility. This is a dream for those fortunate enough to spend their time and leisure here.
We call it God's country because it's so peaceful and so nice out there.
But here, everything's not quite what it seems.
We have a number of deaths every year.
There's something lurking, and it's deadly.
They finally did test for blastomycosis, and by that point, the fungus had eaten through his skull.
Okay, good.
The Burchard family are blessed. They live in Manitoba, Canada. Nice house, lovely family, great holiday cabin in a provincial park.
Everything and anything that you could do to enjoy yourself out there is what we do out there. It's beautiful country, and we really, really enjoy it out there.
Last year, they took the family and family dog Daisy for a well-earned break. It was going to be a week of relaxation. Instead, it became a living nightmare. You see, below the surface, this paradise hides a dark secret. Below the surface lies an invisible killer, a deadly fungus.
It often presents as a chronic, non-healing pneumonia that after many courses of antibiotic therapy persists.
Adrian, if you can just sort of stay there, we'll just pass it to you.
It was a normal, pleasant holiday, with a bit of maintenance thrown in for Bruce and his son Daniel.
Our cottage needed some releveling, so I decided that he was 11 years old of age and could do some work around the cabin. It wasn't just for me. So I hauled him underneath the cabin and I had him removing old wood and rotting wood.
But after the vacation, Daisy, the family dog, got sick.
Our dog developed a disease called blastomycosis. It's a fungus that you get from the soil out there, and you breathe it in.
Blastomycosis is a rare and often fatal infection. Animals and humans can get it.
Blastomycosis is an infection caused by the fungus, Blastomyces dermatitidis, and basically it can present as anything at all. Pneumonias, skin and soft tissue abscesses, bone infections, brain abscesses. So it can cause any kind of infection.
It's not something you can take lightly. One big problem is that no one knows much about this disease.
We don't know how many people are exposed and have latent disease, or disease where the organism is lying dormant, waiting to relapse in the future, or alternatively, people who suppress the disease and keep it under control the rest of their lives. We have no idea.
This disease is a very tricky customer. It's almost impossible to tell if you've got it until it's nearly too late.
Unfortunately, with this disease, there's no test. The test is only once you show symptoms.
Daisy went under the knife. She lost an eye. It seemed the worst was over. But 6 months later, the fungus struck 11-year-old Daniel.
In mid-February, I noticed there was a lump on my head, a small one. The bump got bigger and bigger, and it became more soft.
Daisy's misfortune, in fact, had been a stroke of good luck.
If we didn't know about the disease through our exposure through our pet, through our dog, we would have thought nothing of it.
But the tests proved the lump on Daniel's forehead was blastomycosis.
But what happens is, it begins with 1, that becomes 2, that becomes 4, 8, 16, to an infinite number. And these organisms will destroy the surrounding tissue and just continue to expand.
In Daniel's case, the news was very bad.
We went back in for a checkup appointment and had a CAT scan and noticed that the fungus had eaten right through my skull.
Later, the fungus has to be removed from Daniel's skull. But has it already gone too far? Amy Fell's accident was like so many. Speed and alcohol combined in a tragedy. Hers was the only serious injury, and it was horrific.
I remember opening my eyes and being halfway in the back window and halfway out of the back window, just laying there, not being able to move.
Amy had a very severe spinal cord injury involving her thoracic spinal cord. In her case, loss of function below the level of injury, so no muscle function below the low level of injury and no sensation.
With that sort of damage, Amy faced life in a wheelchair.
Amy was laying in bed, and the doctor kind of looked at him and said that there's no chance for Amy to walk again.
Amy was now a paraplegic. Spinal nerves don't grow back, and her future looked grim. But Amy's not the kind of person to accept bad news.
And ever since the day I was injured, the thing I've been saying, I'm gonna walk again, I'm gonna prove those doctors wrong.
From the start, she was determined to get back on her feet, somehow.
She accepted it right off and says, okay, this is where I'm at. What do I need to do to change my life? And she started right then. She started to work as hard as she could to get back anything that she could.
Amy started therapy. It was the first step on a very long journey. She had goals, and she was determined to reach them.
My first goal was to walk across my stage at my high school graduation. I accomplished that with the first set of leg braces that I had. Another goal would have been to get my car adapted to where I could drive it and then enrolling in college and going to college and living on my own, having my own apartment.
But she still had no feeling in her legs. Then one day, she was watching a TV documentary about a radical treatment for spinal injuries.
And it gave me goosebumps, and it's like, this is something that, you know, maybe you should try, or, you know, and it kind of hit me, and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I gotta try this.
The surgeon, Dr. Lima, worked in Portugal. His procedure involves taking stem cells from under the skull and then placing them into the damaged spine.
We looked at it and says, it's, you know, anything's better than nothing. And we said we have to go for it.
Amy went to Portugal, hoping for the best.
I was probably nervous going into it, but I think I was more excited just because, you know, of what could come out of it.
It's a very complex process. The cells that are brought out, the ones that are thought to perhaps be the most effective in helping with the recovery, are cells that were in process of developing into sense of smell nerves.
It's never a sure bet. The fully developed cells would normally transmit the sense of smell to the brain. When moved, it's hoped they will grow into nerve cells to repair the spinal cord. With intensive therapy, the surgeons hoped Amy might regain some use of her lower body.
We do know that it is not likely to be the, quote, cure. But what we hope is that as time passes, she will continue to see improvement, really moving from her abdomen on down, that give her more mobility.
Several months after the surgery, months of intensive therapy, and there's suddenly a glimmer of hope.
The surgery for me has given me a lot more tingling in my legs, burning sensations.
Just maybe Amy's legs are coming to life. Just maybe this could be a minor miracle.
I've regained movement below my level of injury, being able to kick out individual legs. I have slight knee extensions. I'm showing improvement. Things are happening.
Is more than what I thought, you know, that we were gonna get. So I'm extremely happy with where she's at.
Nobody holds out unrealistic hopes. She may never walk normally again, but with this groundbreaking surgery and her amazing drive, she's going to give it a good shot.
I plan on getting married. Don't have a date set, but I plan on walking down the aisle for that. And just walking again, you know, just living life, you know, like I did before, without the wheelchair.
A vacation at the remote family cabin was the beginning of a medical disaster for the Burchard family.
The fungus had eaten through his skull.
The family dog was struck down by a mysterious brain-eating fungus that hides somewhere in the soil.
Without treatment, about 60% of the people who contact this disease will die. If you can get it, nip it in the bud, diagnose it quickly, there's still a 10% mortality rate.
It often presents as a chronic, non-healing pneumonia that after many courses of antibiotic therapy persists.
Daisy, come on.
Then 11-year-old Daniel became the next victim and was rushed to the hospital.
In mid-February, I noticed there was a lump on my head, a small one. The bump got bigger and bigger, and it became more soft.
Daniel went straight into the OR for a long and difficult operation. The doctors made a terrible discovery. The invasion of blastomycosis had turned the top of his skull to mush.
You know, potentially he could have died on the operating table. We knew that, but also leaving the fungus in there was a sure death sentence also.
The surgeons had to cut out a huge chunk of his skull.
We nipped it just in time. It was able to just be in the bone, which is bad enough to remove the skull, but it didn't affect him neurologically yet. So we were able to basically save his life by getting in there in time.
Daniel's body had been invaded by a silent and deadly killer.
This is exactly what happened to Daniel. A skin and soft tissue mass occurred, which was essentially full of pus in the organisms. The organisms essentially eroded into the bone, leading to this bone destruction, as you can see here, with loss of the inner table of the skull. And if we look at the top of the skull, this large zigzag-shaped area has essentially been destroyed by the organism, which is a process very similar to what happened with Daniel.
In Daniel's case, they'd caught it just in time.
We were very fortunate. He was still battling the fungus on the brain cover, and it was starting to attack into his brain when we started treatment.
Let me see.
But the follow-up treatment is also drastic.
How's that feel?
It's comfortable. Yeah.
He spent a month in the hospital and then had to carry around a drip with antifungal drugs for another 3 months.
Can you just get that on and I'll pump? Okay.
He can't drop his guard against this disease for a second.
All right, you good to go? Yep.
The best way to describe it is like going through chemo. It attacks the body, you poison the body to the point where you kill the fungus. And so you're sort of measuring whether you're killing the body with the cure or killing the disease.
The problem is, this disease doesn't always go away after surgery. It can send out spores throughout the body.
Although we treat it, and we treat for prolonged periods of time, anywhere between 6 months to a year, there's always a remote possibility that a relapse could occur.
Years later, it can come back to bite you again. Like this patient, who'd been under the knife 2 years earlier, but still had the fungus.
And ultimately, that's why Daniel and his family have to be very vigilant, as it could relapse in the future.
Luckily, Daniel's doing fine. 6 months down the road, and so far, so good.
I really don't think that he knows how close he was and how lucky he was.
But what's to stop his folks having it too?
We're obviously concerned about whether we've been exposed and whether we have it developing in us. We're looking for, if we get a lump or a lesion or develop pneumonia, we're definitely going to be all over it again.
As for the cabin, can they ever go back there on summer vacations again?
We've just decided to curtail some activities out there and to go back. As we said, it's the most beautiful country in the world.
Life's getting back to normal for Daniel.
Well, I'm feeling great today. I don't get any more headaches. So I'm just living my life like normal, but I can't do any contact sports where I can get hit in the head, but everything else is just normal.
And there's one special family member the Burchards can thank for Daniel's good health today.
Caught it just in time, and we thank the dog for that.
Oh, yeah, Daisy's kind of my hero. Yeah, she's just a little dog, and she helped me through this problem in my life.
Justin Go was lucky. After suffering a serious head injury playing football, he made a slow but miraculous recovery.
4 out of 5 guys that have my injury die. I was one of the very few in 100 that even could walk and do things on my own again.
But what if there was a way to reduce the chances of head injuries that might result in cases like Justin's? Every second is vital in treating head injuries. But often the player doesn't even know he's suffered one.
It's been well documented, footballers going into the wrong huddle, getting their bell rung, not saying my brain is damaged, I gotta leave, keep playing, and end up, crossing to the other team and ending up in their huddle.
So a company has come up with an ingenious and potentially life-saving device, the Head Impact Telemetry System, or HITS.
It's very important that we understand brain injury in the first place. So HITS started as a research project where we could first understand what was happening to the athlete that was leading to mild traumatic brain injury.
The helmet system works like this. Sensors are installed in the athlete's helmet. They talk by wireless links to a sideline computer. Then if there's a head impact, the trainer's pager goes off.
It tells them what player number, the impact time, and what the impact value was.
In the case of a player like Justin, the computer would have registered a significant impact. The system may well provide future protection for the millions of American football players and help prevent some serious head injuries like Justin goes.
There's about 150,000 concussions in American football every year across the United States. That's a big number. If we can reduce that by just a few, that would be a great help long-term for the children.
Rosemary Jacobs' early life was as colorful as any child's. But then something incredible happened. At 14, Rosemary's face turned gray and stayed that way.
Certainly seems apparent that once you turn gray, basically you stay that way for life.
58-year-old Rosemary Jacobs is a victim of a cruel condition called argyria. It causes permanent, irreversible skin discoloration.
It's been termed the walking dead. That is, people who have this discoloration tend to look like they're the walking dead.
Rosemary was a healthy, rosy-cheeked youngster growing up outside New York City. When she was 11, her doctor prescribed drops containing colloidal silver to treat a runny nose. The drops didn't fix that, but after 3 years using them, the teenager's skin turned a gruesome gray. A nurse at the local hospital made the connection.
The nurse said to me, "You're taking nose drops, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Stop, they've got silver in them, that's where you're discolored."
But it was too late to save Rosemary's skin. The silver in the compound had done its damage for good.
Silver can be cumulative. That is, the amount of silver you get in your diet and the amount of silver you take in these supplements can gradually, over the years, cause this discoloration. It may not take 6 months, it may not take 2 years. It can happen after a period of several years, and once it happens, it's very permanent.
The dangers of using silver as a medical treatment had been known since early last century. But when Rosemary was given it, it was still being advertised as a medicinal marvel.
Most doctors weren't using silver drugs. They knew that it was useless and dangerous. And I suspect that if my doctor had read his medical journals instead of the ads that came from drug companies in an era when they weren't strictly regulated, he never would have used the drug.
Sadly, it doesn't seem that silver compounds do anything. Silver is a failed antibiotic. Years ago, that was all they had until this stuff called penicillin came out, and silver essentially disappeared. It's never been effective at anything.
There's no known cure for argyria. Rosemary's face is gray for good, although thankfully, her discoloration isn't as bad as it was 30 years ago. She did try dermabrasion in the 70s. It only scrubbed away some of the gray.
I went from being a solid gray, like this kind of a gray, to being patchy.
What happens is when you get silver into your system over a prolonged period of time, or even shortly, silver binds to several places in the body. The silver binds to the thyroid gland, the silver binds to the liver, the silver binds to the adrenal glands, and to some extent it binds into the brain. But where it causes its most apparent situation is where it binds to the basement membrane of the skin.
It's when you see Rosemary alongside someone without the condition, you can really feel for her. There's been some success for argyria using laser treatment, but Rosemary has chosen not to pursue it.
I decided a long time ago, if you don't like the way I look, there's nothing I can do about it, but you can look the other way.
Rosemary uses a little makeup to give her face some color, but trying to cover her face and mask her condition hasn't worked.
The only thing it would do would make me go from one weird color to another.
To put makeup on, it ends up being very splotchy and brings out the discoloration even more because her skin is slate gray. It's not pink, as most makeups are designed to enhance or correct.
Luckily for Argyria sufferers, the silver stuck in their bodies doesn't seem to cause any other physical problems. But it has destroyed the social lives of many.
I would say most Argyria sufferers miss out on a lot of life. After developing the condition, they seem to become kind of shy. I think it's in part because of the reactions they get from people when they're out in social environments. In good lighting, it's very unearthly to see a person with the discoloration.
I've had people refuse me jobs because they thought my face was bad for business. Things like that. I've had difficulty getting apartments. I've never been married, I've never had children, and people have often asked me, do you think this is because of your discoloration? Well, I think that might be part of it. I had less opportunities. Not many young boys wanted to date somebody who looked very different.
Rosemary isn't angry anymore at the doctor who gave her the silver compound. What's eating her up is that silver supplements are still being pushed, especially on the internet.
Some of them are still saying that their products are non-toxic, you can take as much as you want. That in spite of the fact that there are now many, many cases of Argyria that have been caused by dietary supplements on the market now, or products that people homebrews, that people made themselves. And as long as they're doing it, silver accumulates in your body. So that there are going to be many more cases as long as people are taking silver.
For Argyria specialists like Dr. Bouts, the case against taking silver is black and white.
One of my contentions is if you give an infinite number of people infinite access to silver, sooner or later a bunch of them are going to start turning gray.
If people want to take silver, to me that's fine, as long as they are aware of the danger.
A skull in the shape of a clover leaf.
I found out 2 weeks before she was born that there was a problem.
This is not the result of an accident or injury.
Then they thought she had some type of dwarfism that was pretty much fatal.
Incredibly, trapped inside this skull is a normal brain.
Many people who took care of Grace from the outset had not seen them, and they didn't know what to expect.
30,000 genes make up the human blueprint. It only needs one to be defective for things to go badly wrong. Cloverleaf skull syndrome is a genetic disorder of one growth gene. Grace is now 16. Cloverleaf skull, or Pfeiffer syndrome, occurs in 1 in a million babies. Its most obvious effect is in the development of the skull.
Pfeiffer syndrome is a condition, it's a genetic condition in which bones of the skull and bones elsewhere in the body grow abnormally, and in particular in the skull, the plates fuse prematurely.
Okay, I want you to bounce with your legs. Wish.
The fact that Grace's brain survived intact is a medical miracle.
Keep your whoa, the legs are shaking. You getting tired?
In most babies, the skull is not yet fused. It's a self-adjusting case for a fast-growing brain. But Grace's skull wasn't like other babies.
She didn't have any soft spots. And so her brain was trying to grow, which is why her face got, so big here and up here.
That meant there was no room for her brain to grow. Brain damage was a real threat.
When she was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks old, they had to go in and they took her skull from ear to ear all the way back. They took her whole skull off because she had so much pressure in her head.
At 3 weeks, she had to have 12 hours of surgery to make room for her brain. Then the surgeon had to go in again to save her eyes. Grace couldn't close them.
And what's happening there is that the orbits, holes in your skull, in her are too flat. And so her eyes have formed normally, but there's no place for them to form into.
With cloverleaf skull syndrome, life expectancy can be measured in months.
You don't see that many children with cloverleaf skull who are surviving even the newborn period.
But Grace was a fighter.
Would hold your finger as hard as she could, and she was born for a great reason.
It was the beginning of a lifelong bond between mother and child.
Me and Grace have always been on the same page. I know her like the back of my hand.
Cloverleaf skull is a genetic disorder that can affect more than just the skull and the face. Grace's throat was never properly formed. She has to breathe through a hole in her windpipe. She doesn't have any elbow joints, and her vocal cords don't work correctly.
Did you shut the door? Thank you.
Grace can't walk. That's not the fault of her disorder. At age 4, she had a fall.
She ended up with an epidural hematoma. She was on a step stool helping me peel potatoes at the kitchen sink. And I don't know what happened, and she just lost her train of thought and turned and fell off the step stool and hit her head.
For the rest of her life, she'll never be free of a wheelchair. Amazingly, she's made it to 16, and she's going strong. Whatever physical weaknesses Grace might have, they don't affect her spirit.
She's tough in every aspect of her life. I mean, she is. She's a fighter, totally. She's stronger than any person I've ever known in my entire life. Come up here, Grace. I see pink.
Grace is just like other teenagers. She's a full-on shopping junkie. Grace looks unusual, but remember, this kid is like any other 16-year-old. She has normal feelings.
You like those?
But ask her how she deals with other people's stares and comments, and she'll tell you straight.
You don't mind if people say stuff about you?
Hey, yeah, okay.
You don't mind they're not your friends?
It's an amazingly mature attitude.
She has the self-esteem of a supermodel, which I think is great. I mean, it's like, you know, people will say, Grace, you look so cute today. I always do. Bath gel?
Grace could have more surgery to make adjustments to her face, but it's a sign of her spirit that she's turned the offer down.
It's her face and her body, and at this point, she loves that, and she's very comfortable with that, and I don't feel like I should change that.
Make no mistake, life's not easy with Grace's condition, but she takes everything in her stride.
Every day.
Every day's a good day?
Yep.
Grace is at school in the 11th grade. Her brain functions just fine. The disorder is only a physical hurdle. The real blow for Grace is that there's no cure, only management. But no one's worrying about her future.
I don't know of another child with a cloverleaf skull that has done as well as Grace.
She's Wonder Woman. She is Wonder Woman.
And Grace is sure of one thing. She knows her family will always be there for her.
Yep. Hear that?
We're stuck like glue.
Yep.
You're never leaving.
Yep.